Now that we've talked about the four sides of the cabin, let's head inside and talk about some of the things that need to be done in there. Well, as you saw, as I just opened up the door, the first thing you're greeted with is the freezers and this wall. Even though I try to keep it organized, it still is very chaotic. Your eye doesn't have a place to rest. And I've also mentioned in a previous video that I will be ripping out the center island and the counter that are currently the only built-in fixtures within this kitchen. And when I do that, I effectively am going to be getting rid of all the built-in storage that there is currently. I'll be replacing the center island with my kitchen table, and I'll be replacing the counter with my version of an antique French butcher's counter. And that butcher's counter will serve me well because it'll provide enough counter working space for meal prep as well as for canning and things like that. And underneath it will be my storage of my water jugs. And then I'll install just a hand pump water faucet, and I will be using dry sinks. My dry sinks are essentially just going to be these giant bowls that I purchased off of Amazon. And these bowls will allow me to move them out of the way when I need work surface or put them back in place to wash and rinse dishes. I have two of these currently. And these bowls are going to be fantastic for allowing me the opportunity to have usable space that functions in the way that I need it to. These are large enough that I can put all of my bakeware in here, all my other pots and pans. It's deep enough that I can wash everything. Then I'm going to need a place to store all my things. So why not create a pantry here on the main level? And this wall that you see in front of me, that is not enough. Now, I've mentioned previously that the pipes have frozen in the cellar this last winter, and they were plugged into heat tape. Now, I can't guarantee you that that heat tape is functional, and that makes me caution whether or not I should put my jarred items down in the cellar. And so I need to create a pantry. Luckily for me, on the other side of this wall is a room that I've not really talked about a whole lot. There is actually a bathroom on the other side of this wall. Now, I've mentioned before that I want a dry cabin, so ripping this bathroom out is no harm, no foul to me. In fact, I was going to do it regardless because nothing in here is salvageable nor functional. And then I'll go ahead and cut a door right here in the pantry wall that you see now and build this room out as my pantry. I'll move the freezers in there so they're in the ambient temperature of the rest of the cabin, not working too hard or not working well enough due to the temperature. There was a concern raised that during the heat of the summer, since the Arctic entry is not insulated, that room would become very warm, causing the freezers to have to work additionally hard in order to maintain the cold temperature. There was also the concern that in the wintertime, since the Arctic entry is not insulated, that the freezers may not function properly to maintain that cold temperature at that point either. So really only a few months out of the year would they even be effectively working in the Arctic entry. Now I know in Alaska there are a lot of people who tend to store their freezers outside. I've not actually talked to anybody about it, but my assumption is during the winter months when the temperatures drop below freezing, that they unplug their freezers and they just let nature freeze everything. And I can store all my canned goods in here, so I don't have to worry about them freezing in the root cellar below in the winter months. And I can store all my kitchenwares in here, pots and pans and larger items such as my canner and things like that I don't necessarily have room for otherwise. And as you can see, as the view changed and that opened up, a window went in behind me. That window is scheduled to go in next week, and the sideboard is scheduled to be here in about 9 to 10 weeks from now. So I have this room all figured out. Then let's talk about when you come out of that and you head towards the stairs, what's going to happen there. When you walk out of the new pantry, you're immediately met with the hatch leading into the cellar. And if you turn to your right, then your view opens up into the main living quarters. When you open up the hatch to lead into the cellar, you have to secure that hatch open, and then you go to the cellar, and then that hatch remains open the entire time that you're down there. That is a problem. I'm here by myself, but I do have Kenai, and as I mentioned, when the time comes that Kenai's no longer around, I'll be replacing him with a new dog, and most likely it'll be a set of new dogs. And puppies have a tendency to roughhouse, and I don't want to risk a puppy falling into there because they get pushed by one of the other dogs, not realizing, what they've just done. And should I have guests here, I don't want a guest to inadvertently fall into an open pit either. And so my intention is to wall this area off, install a man door that can be closed behind me, and basically create not only a stairwell, but a little corridor here. So I have access from the kitchen into the pantry and then directly into the cellar. And you're not met with this visual from the main living area. There'll just be a wall there. But let's talk about these stairs leading up to the second level, because those stairs, they need to go as well. These stairs are a death trap. Let me show you why they're a death trap. One, you have no handrail on this side of the stairs. Then the distance between one tread to the next is not universal as you go up the stairs. The depth of the tread is not universal from one tread to the next. And some of the treads are twisted. This particular tread, which is the second tread from the bottom, which sits about 2 feet, I believe, off the ground. This tread is actually split in half, and the back half of it is missing. And it is this tread that is a death trap. When I first moved into the cabin, I actually fell off the stairs twice, and I fell off of this particular tread both times. And if you look back in one of my previous videos, you'll see a hard ridge underneath my sweater, both front and back. That's because I had to brace myself in a corset because I herniated a disc in my back, and I could not bend at the waist. I could not bend over, and I could not twist without creating further injury to myself. I absolutely could not bend. I could not bend this way or forward or backwards. And I put the corset on to allow my body time to heal, but I still had chores I had to do. I still had to haul water. I still had to do laundry, and I still had to bring in wood. And I know there were some comments about, well, you should use your sled, or you need a sled. Didn't you get a cart? Yes, I had all those things, but I could not pull the cart with my injury. And I could lift and I could carry this way, but to pull something would put pressure on the disc that was herniated. And honestly, it took about 6 weeks for me to heal. So these steps, though, these stairs also, they're just sitting in here barely by maybe a ½ inch lipped. Some of them it's thinner than that. Some of them it's greater than that. And I just don't feel safe on these stairs. And so I am going to actually have these replaced. And when I replace them, I'm going to replace them potentially with stairs similar to what Aaron built me as the temporary steps outside the back door. When Aaron cut in the back door to the cabin, he took the excess logs and just stacked them up beneath the door to create a set of temporary steps. And I absolutely love these steps. But if I had to sacrifice these steps and repurpose them to be stair treads going up to the loft on the inside of the cabin, I would totally be okay with that, because A, my frugal nature kicks in and I already have the material, so why not use them? And they're thick enough, sturdy enough that they'll last forever. And they're all universal in size and depth, so I don't have to worry about having one thinner, one thicker, or what have you. So I think that's going to be our plan, is to turn these D-log remnants, plus some additional ones that'll come from the window that they'll cut in up front, and some logs that came from Aaron's property, into the new stair treads going up to the loft. If we could utilize something like that to make a new set of stairs going up, and harvest some new logs to accommodate those steps, that would be fantastic. I love those steps, by the way. But nonetheless, this needs to change for safety reasons, if nothing else. It's not that there's anything aesthetically wrong with it. I mean, it fits the rustic vibe of the cabin, but it's not very safe. And so I have plans to switch these out. And in my opinion, it really can't come too soon. I have to reset every step on the stairs. I don't have the availability to walk down these stairs like a normal person would go down the stairs, because I'm fearful that I'll fall off of them again, and the next time might be even worse. So you can never be too safe. And especially since I'm the only one here. Being the only one here, you know, I didn't have anybody that could come rescue me. Safety should always be your number one concern. All right, let's talk about another safety issue in the cabin that needs to get addressed. And that is directly above me. The floors that make up the second story are on floor joists that are 2 foot on center, and they're not blocked. As you can see, it's just rough sawn lumber that is making up the floors. The one room that has drywall in it does have some plywood sheeting, but the rest of the floors are just these, you know, thin lumber strips, and they're not very secure. They're not very stable. There's a few places where if I were to go upstairs and step on the floor, you would be able to see the floor bow underneath my footstep, and that's without putting my weight on it. I need to come in and add blocking to all these floors before I can move my furniture upstairs, which luckily I don't have that much furniture, but eventually I'd like to move my bed out of the main living area and up to the second story. So I need to add blocking to all the floor joists in this part of the cabin as well as in the cellar. There's no blocking in the cellar either, and the floor in the cabin also gives way a little bit, so that needs to be remedied as well. As you come into the cellar, on this right-hand side, I would like to have some storage bins built for the root crops. And then I would like to have some shelving put above that to house any other crops that need to be stored down here, as well as potentially some of the canned goods. Again, I need to monitor the temperature over this winter, make sure it's not freezing down here, especially now that I've taken out the old insulation. When my son arrives, I'm going to have him assist me in applying some new insulation down here. That insulation is just going to be reflectix. And I watched Boss of the Swamp do it, and he swears by it. So I trust, you know, his opinion. And so I'm going to give it a shot myself and see how it works. Fingers crossed that it works well. And then I'll be able to store, you know, more items down here. Then on the other side of the root cellar, I'm just going to use this for general storage, much as anybody would in a basement. And, you know, I'll just put some pallets down here. Not that I am going to have water piped into the cabin, but I will be having some water storage down here as well. And on the potential that any of that storage develops a leak, I don't want that to ruin anything that might be stored down here. So I'll put some pallets down here to store anything on, or build some additional shelving as, you know, funds allow. Now that we're back on the main level, let's talk about the floors. The floors on this level are just like they are in the Arctic entry. They're plywood. They're really dried out. I'm sure that they're many, many years old, and they're starting to separate the different layers of ply one from the other, and therefore they're splintering. There's many places where there's divots in the floors, and they are not level. Adding blocking below in the cellar will help hopefully prevent any future sag, because some of the pieces of furniture that I have coming in are quite large and heavy. Then I will be coming in and leveling out these floors and adding some engineered laminate flooring. I really can't afford hardwoods, and so I'm just gonna have to do the next best thing. And, you know, I'm still deciding exactly what I want, but really it'll boil down to what's available when I have the funds available to do these floors. and that will also be going in up above. And we'll talk about that in a second. We'll talk about the loft in just a moment. But let's talk about the walls down here. And as you can see behind me, the walls are just that 1970s paneling. It's not very well adhered to the walls. And when Aaron cut in the back door, I was able to see that that foam continues all the way behind the paneling. But he was able to scrape away that foam really easily. In my opinion, it seemed easy. Aaron might disagree. In the kitchen, there is no paneling over the walls in there. And I actually really like the look of the exposed backside of the D-logs. And that's what the main floor walls are going to be, is just the backside of the D-logs. I bought this log cabin because I like the rustic look of it. And I want it to look like a log cabin. I don't want modern finishes in here. So if I'm trying to create a rustic log cabin look, why put in a faux finish when I already have logs that I can work with? Once we get the chinking on the outside of the cabin, seal up any air gaps, then the exposed log on the inside is going to be perfect for what I'm looking for. All right, so now that we've talked about the floor in here and we've talked about the walls, there's one more thing in the kitchen that we need to address. The wood stove is now in a new location, and it is working a lot more efficiently than it did when it was just a few feet over to the other side of me. But at that point, it had a couple of bins in the chimney stack. Now that chimney runs straight up outside the cabin with no bins in it, nothing to slow down the airflow. And this gets really, really hot now. And I can get a hot burn going on this very, very quickly. But this has a couple safety issues with it. And one of them is that there is a crack in the top of the wood stove. That crack has been welded previously, but I've noticed that that crack is growing. And that could mean that I'm allowing carbon monoxide to seep into the cabin, and that can be a death trap. So I did a video earlier this year regarding what it cost me to heat this cabin over the last year, and my plan was to redo that video this next spring. However, knowing that there's a crack in the top of this, and that I need to empty the oil tank so that we can move it next year, I probably won't be using this a whole lot this next year. Instead, I'll be running the oil burner as much as possible so that I can burn down through all that oil, and only using the wood stove when necessary. But that means I need to replace this wood stove. I was going to replace it anyhow, but now that I'm seeing that this crack has grown significantly since the stove has been moved, I need to think about getting it replaced sooner rather than later. And what I'm looking at getting is a wood cook stove. I've only really been able to source an Elmira cook stove here in Alaska. I would like to see that there's some other options available so that I can find the one that works best for me and my budget. But if the Elmira is all I can get, then so be it. That's what I'll use. But also the other reason that I want to replace this is so that I have something that's more efficient for cooking on. I can cook on here, and I can bake in this, believe it or not, but it's not the best idea. It's not that safe. And so I would like to replace this with a wood cook stove. Sooner rather than later, that's got to happen. All right, so we've covered everything on the main floor. Let's head upstairs and take a look at what's going on up there. As you come up into the loft, the first room you're greeted with is this one here. You're greeted with a room of eyesores is what you're greeted with. The foam on the walls that you see here is in all the loft area. This room, the walled off room next to me, and the wall behind me here in what will be my bedroom. And in this room that we're looking at currently, I plan on building in a bookcase right here and putting in a small desk underneath this window to function as my sewing desk. I'll pull up the carpet in here as well as in the other loft, and then put some flooring up over that. It'll probably be the same engineered flooring that I plan on doing on the main level of the cabin. I've now moved into the other loft, and this will become my bedroom. And so I have this wall behind me here, and I have this vapor barrier here to deal with. The ceiling is exposed in the entire loft, and most of it makes up the walls of the loft area. As I showed down below, that the floor for this area is made up of the rough sawn lumber. I do like the look of it, and so I plan on continuing that look along these sloped walls and the ceiling of the loft area. And then the walls in the loft itself will get that same treatment, so that it's just, you know, a continuing of that surface. As I mentioned down below, the walls down there will just be the back side of the D-logs, but those logs don't continue up into the upper half of the cabin, and scraping the foam off of the upper half is not going to be that easy. So we'll just cover it up with some dimensional lumber and then put that rough sawn lumber over the top of that, and have that look continue out throughout the entire half of the upper portion of the cabin. This room is going to become my office. I'm not sure this room's going to get a whole lot of attention as far as construction is concerned. Because it's my office, it's going to be more function over form. It's the only room that has walls and a door, so it'll allow me to shut the door and not have to look at my computers after hours. But I am adding a set of metal lockers in here, and those metal lockers are going to hold all of my medical supplies. And speaking of medical supplies, I want to say thank you to JR, who recently just sent me via my Amazon wish list this really robust first aid kit, as well as another bag of bacon strips for Kenai. Kenai says thanks also. And I want to say thank you to Heidi Amador for another book. This book is Wilderness Medicines, and this is very thoughtful, as well are the cards that Kim hand created and her handwritten notes and a note from Tara. I really appreciate all of your support here on the channel. There have been some questions regarding the Amazon wish list and how to find it. Underneath each of my videos, there is a full description of the video. When you're viewing the video on a PC, you'll see show more. Or if you're viewing it on a mobile device, just to the right-hand side, directly under the video, you see a little down arrow. Click on those, that'll open up that description. And in there, you'll find all the links and the ways that you can support the channel. When it comes to the Amazon wish list, that is a list that I created for myself to help remind me of things that I've thought of that I need for the cabin or that I need for the channel itself, such as SD cards or lenses for my cameras, lighting, things like that. There are those that have asked, how can they help? And that is one way where someone can help, is by purchasing a gift off of this list and having it sent to my P.O. box. I'll be accepting packages at the P.O. box up through October 1st. After that point, all packages will be sent back to the sender. So if you're wondering, well, how do I know if somebody's already purchased that? If it's on the list, it's still needed. That's the easiest way to think about it. And I do want to say, I really appreciate everybody who is willing to help support my efforts here at the cabin and with this channel. And even if it's just by watching my videos and giving them a thumbs up, it means the world to me. So thank you, everyone. All right, let's continue on. As we make our way out of the walled-in room that will become the office, we come back to where the railings are surrounding the two lofts. These railings are really flimsy and they're quite open as well. So if you had a small child or a rambunctious animal, or if you were rather clumsy like I tend to be, these railings don't give you any comfort of security whatsoever. And so I'll be taking these railings out and we'll be utilizing the rafters from the old roof once again to create custom log railings to go up here to surround the two lofts. I don't have any plans at the immediate to switch out the windows up here or anything. So, and the door leading out to the balcony, it's funny, when it was down on the main level, I really didn't like it. But now that it's up here, it looks right at home, and I like the fact that it lets light in from this side of the cabin. So it can stay, but let's head down into the Arctic entry and talk about that room as well. This is just a big empty room, and I have a lot of real estate in here that I can do things with. And so in this back corner behind me, I plan on building essentially a bathroom in here. It'll have a composting toilet and a wash basin that's just basically going to be like an antique style pitcher and basin, and then a shower that will drain out towards the garden, and a sauna combination. So it'll just be a wet sauna basically. I'm considering buying a NIPA, N-I-P-P-A, I think that's how it's pronounced. That's at least how it's spelled. Wood stove for the sauna, and then wrapping copper tubing around the chimney stack and running that into a water jacket to allow me to have hot water for the showers. And then having an open grate floor, preferably made out of cedar or teak, and having that run into a hose that I mentioned would then drain out to the orchard. Not necessarily the leafy vegetables or root crops, but anything that's a perennial shrubbery or woody plant, it should be fine to drain out that way. It'll drain through a rock and gravel bed so that it can filter out any impurities before reaching the plants. I will be storing some wood in here, but not as much as I originally thought. Using this still as my Arctic entry, so I'll have the availability to hang up all my coats and boots and things like that in here. And then in the corner just opposite of me is where I would like to set up my laundry station. And that way I can just dump that water directly into the shower and have that drain out towards the garden. So that's what's going to take place in here. And I think that pretty much covers everything that I have going on here at the property. Like I said, there's a lot, and it's a lot to think about. So I need to sit and take a deep breath and collect my thoughts and make sure that I'm prioritizing things correctly. But I want to thank everybody for watching this video. Please stick around for the outtakes and make sure that you give this video a thumbs up. Subscribe if you haven't, and I will see you on the next one. Thanks again for watching. In the Arctic, in the outdoor kitchen, I would like two things in there that to me are an absolute must. One is I would like a paella, which is an Argentina. I don't know how you would say that. An Argentina style grill called a paella. And if I mispronounce that, I apologize, but Spanish is not my native language. Then in addition to having the paella installed, I would like to have something, but my brain just went blank and I can't remember what it was now.
And action.
Lifting this hatch is not that difficult, but it's not that easy either. Let's just say it's quite the workout, and I will probably have buns of steel. I might have those. I will probably have abs of steel this time next year because of it. So